Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Yanik Berube. He is a senior director of software development with a passion for leadership, technology, and the people and teams who build these technologies. I wanted to talk to him about the challenges translating complexity into clear and actionable insights. So we're going to explore lessons that any technical leader can apply to improve clarity, influence, and impact across their organization. So welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Yannick.
Well, thanks, Neil. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, same here. So first question, Yannick, who are the most important non-technical audiences you communicate with as part of your job?
Well, there are a number of them. So just a quick clarification. I'm now a VP of engineering at Hootsuite since September. I haven't updated my LinkedIn profile. So I do work across with many functions across the business. I would say from an engineering perspective, probably the folks who are closest to us are customer support. We typically hear, of issues that are happening with our customers with our product. We work very closely with our design and product management counterparts as part of kind of like um, the product development triad. And then external to this, we work closely with the sales department. They need to understand essentially kind of like where we're heading, the types of problems that we're trying to solve. They are often in conversation in deals where they're trying to make sure that like we are the right fit for the customers. So they typically ask for some support from the engineering team. And beyond that, like at the VP level, we also interface quite a bit with the business development team, who are always looking for how we further the business, whether it's through mergers, acquisitions, and events like that, or opportunities of that sort.
Cool. Cool, cool, cool. So I'm curious, Yannick, when it comes to your work, how do you decide the right level of detail when you're speaking as a technical person to non-technical people?
Yeah, it all boils down to the audience. I'm sure you've heard this before. I think it's really important to know your audience and understand what they care about, what motivates them, and then speak from that position. Kind of like try to link your messaging to to what the audience actually like cares about. If you're talking to customer support, you need to put yourself a little bit in their shoes. They are the face of the organization to our customers who need help. So typically they'll care most about like when the problem will be fixed, what's the nature of the problem, are there workarounds? So it's all great to be explaining kind of like fundamentally what the problem is, but like potentially from a technical standpoint. But ultimately, you need to bring it back to why things are working a certain way, why we're in this situation, and what that means in terms of like when the customer can expect a fix, or if there's something that they can do in the meantime to solve for the problems that they're trying to solve in their day-to-day operations.
Yeah. Yannick, as a technical person, I always often suspect that, we have all this technical expertise, but we're not the best at putting it in a way that others understand. And a way to get around that is to try to simplify as much as possible if you're speaking to a non-technical person. How do you go about real or recognizing whether you've oversimplified when you're speaking to others?
I think well, so yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think simplifying is really, really important. I would say that sometimes a mechanism that I've used and I've seen used successfully is leaning on analogies. Analogies can take you a little bit too far sometimes, and oversimplifying can do that as well. I would say like the best way to know whether or not you've oversimplified it. It's a trick that I frequently use is to ask essentially. like clarifying questions, or ask the person who you're, or the audience that you're trying to communicate with, to restate in their own words like what they understood, to basically try to bridge that communication chasm. It's helpful to go down that path. Put yourself in the shoes of the audience, and really figure out like what they understood, what they heard.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Yannick, because with any communication, we have our intent, and then the people who are listening to us have what they take in, and you want to make sure that that gap is as small as possible. So certainly, I do like your idea of basically putting it back in their court and essentially saying to them, "What did you think I said?" You know?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. There's so many. It's so interesting, right? We are where we come from. We're all very used to language to communicate, and we feel that it's a very natural thing to do. But in reality, there's so many layers that communication has to go through, and it results in like all kinds of different ways people understand your message. Yeah, so like testing the waters, figuring out like what they heard, asking them to restate them in their own words. That's very useful tactic.
Yeah. And another thing I was thinking about, Yannick, is a lot of us technical people, we forget what it was like to not be technical. So obviously, you're a VP of engineering. So you've been in this field for a long time. So what it's second hat to you. But then do we ever remember what it was like when we weren't the VP of engineering and or
Yeah,
we weren't that individual contributor even, when we weren't even in the field? Like what kind of information could we have understood back then? And it's like, why don't we harken back to that person and prepare
yeah.
to communicate to that person as opposed to the expert that you now are?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is about like building the understanding, building the empathy. I would say that if you one of the techniques also that you can use there is leverage someone in your surroundings, like someone in your family, potentially your friend who's non-technical. If you have an important message and you're communicating with a non-technical audience, it may be like a good chance for like to ask them to listen on like what you're going to be saying, like practice, um, and for them to tell you like this is like what you're talking about, and this section is jargon, or you're using these acronyms that make no sense to me, or I get the big picture, but there's a lot of details that I just cannot grasp. Um, uh, Again, like yes, it's absolutely foundational for you to be able to be able to communicate effectively, and it's a good trick to lean into. If you do this too often, they may get bored with the things that you're trying to share. But so it's always good to lean on a friend.
Absolutely. Has there ever been, or do you have an example either that involves you or someone else in which a technical presentation didn't land well, and how was that addressed?
Yeah, I mean, it does happen. It happens on occasion, and actually, it even happens to technical presentation to technical people. Um, there's some fundamentals of communicating that are really essential. I've seen engineers deliver some presentations that um, were really rich with information. They were the thought behind them was solid, but they failed to like, and that's what I've seen most often. They fail to really tap into people's like natural curiosity, and I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that they they didn't like we are we've communicated a lot of our knowledge through history, through stories, and I think like our brains are really wired for stories or narratives. And a collection of information and a bunch of slides put together does not make a story. So there's something really important like that, and I've worked with a number of engineers on this around like this idea of like the narrative arc, and it sounds very foreign to some people when they want to present kind of like a case for like why we would go a certain way, or pick a certain technology or something like that. But there is there's often a way to explain or spin up like your information in such a way that's like far more compelling. If you use like one of these like narrative arcs, I think it's very powerful, and I think it speaks a lot to like how our brains are wired. We're fundamentally we fundamentally evolved to like really understand these types of stories really well. So like yeah, there's been a number of examples in my career where the material was good. It's just like it's how you deliver it, how you tie it together, um, and bring it to that arc of like the you have to explain like what is it that you're going through. You have to talk about the failures. You have to like build it up to get to a place where like that you brought the audience through it. They understand it, but they felt the story was compelling. Like it spoke to them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times with technical people, they just assume that the data itself is compelling. And if you've worked in the field long enough, then yeah, you might actually think that's the case. But if you're speaking to non-technical people, they're no, it's not compelling to them at all. There's a bunch of numbers and a bunch of graphs and charts. It's like, why should I care about any of this?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of that as well. I very much identify with this idea that numbers are compelling, but I think you can do both. Like at the end of the day, I think you could tell a really good story through the numbers, and I think you could tie it together into a narrative again that is compelling, that speaks to people.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. You know, Yannick, I'm kind of curious to get your take on this. When it comes to technical people and them improving their communication skills, how do you think it differs from non-technical people and their communication skills?
Um, yeah, I think there's a little bit of like unlearning in the sense that if you're always in a technical environment, you're very used to the jargon, you're very used to certain ways of approaching how you describe problems, etc. So there's a bit of unlearning and going back to like, um, and I don't want to dumb this down. It's just like tell the say it more simply. I think so. Like the unlearning of like the very like technical aspect of things. Um, the one of the the thing that I see the most often is there's a lot of people on the technical track that um, haven't been invited. It's not something that you do naturally. If you talk to a salesperson, they spend a lot of time talking to customers, to prospects. Um, as an individual contributor, you spend a lot of your days building. And while there are some opportunities in a small group to explain to your peers, what you're doing and why, it's limited. So I think there's also a part of it that is kind of like really kind of like learning the fundamentals of like public speaking and like being effective at it. I would say like what I've seen they benefit a lot from, we all benefit a lot from practicing. And I think like just looking for as many opportunities as possible, especially as you're growing your career, looking for opportunities to speak publicly, whether it's like within your company at meetups or any function. I think it's just like this idea of practicing is really really potent, because that's the only thing that's going to help you eventually get like become more and more comfortable with public speaking.
Yeah, you know, when you were speaking, Yannick, it reminded me of a conference that I attended, not this past summer, but the summer before that. It was an engineering conference. At least the majority of people there were engineers. And one of the people that was speaking was a business development person from a company. And after the presentation, he got a whole bunch of technical questions he couldn't answer. And I felt really bad for him. But luckily, there were two engineers from his company who were in the audience. And the room was small enough that we could hear them speak from their seats, and they answered basically all the questions that anyone had. And I remember thinking to myself, well, why didn't one of them at least co-present with this guy as opposed to just leaving them just out there to answer these
Yeah.
technical questions from all these engineers?
Yeah, it speaks to like know your audience. I think that example is great. Like it illustrates 2 points. Like, be prepared to talk to your audience, like know your audience. If they're very technical, they will be asking pointed questions around some of the technicalities of what you've presented. Um, the other point is uh, maybe, and I can't speak to like why that decision was made, but maybe that business development person was picked because they're quite polished. Again, like they spend a lot of their time speaking to a number of people, whether they're investors, leaders in other organization, etc. So they do tend to be like really well practiced. So potentially, like the company, whoever decided, like, oh, maybe this person should present, like they're good at it. I think it's a potentially a failed opportunity to grab one of the engineers that supported that person, and give them the opportunity to practice and hone their skills on in public speaking.
Yeah, I fully agree. I just remember just at the time, just seeing in the audience, I'm just looking at these engineers and like, oh, you seem to have all the answers. Like you should be up in front of us and for this guy. I was like, well, like again,
Yeah.
maybe different next time.
Yes. Yes. I mean, like I think we've all been in these kind of like situations. Like, if I'm supporting sales, like there are times when I get pulled into conversations where on the other side of the table for a sale, like I need to talk to like, technical people or folks who are very like security minded, etc. And they will ask the pointed questions as they should. And like we need to work as a team on this in terms of like the response. I I'm a well, especially with these types of situations, maybe not like in a conference setting, but I strongly believe that like you're stronger with a team that is like well rounded, where you have some representation from across the business to help you.
Yeah, and I firmly believe that as a technical person, I don't really want us outsourcing what we know to other people anyway, because they're not gonna. I don't trust them. We might need to be maybe we need to be less cynical, but because we know what we know, I think we're in the best position to be able to communicate that. And you can always train, technical people to have these communication skills. It's a lot easier to do that than to ask a non-technical person, like a business development person, to speak on a technical topic to a bunch of engineers at a conference.
I agree. I agree, and I think like I mean the trust bit. There's like I think it depends on how your organization operates, but I agree that the bar or the complexity of the material that you need to learn to become a proficient public speaker is potentially like lower than to know in depth, like the type of experience that you would require to know in depth, like the technical field. But again, like the other part that uh, is essential is that like unless you do this, you won't be developing the skills to be a strong or a capable public speaker. Which, in the case of for many individual contributors, eventually they'll head into careers where they will need to build that skill. So it's an opportunity miss, and that's true regardless of if you go down the management path or the technical like the fellowship or like the technical path. Both in both cases, you need to become proficient at public speaking. So again, I think it's just an opportunity missed not to do this, not to encourage our engineers to stand in front of people and talk about their work.
Indeed. When it comes to speaking for yourself, Yannick, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
No, no, that is absolutely not. I'm a deep introvert, and it even today it makes me fairly uncomfortable to do this. So it has come from practice. I was lucky enough. I started my career in academia, and the expectation is that you do research, but you also present and discuss. So I discuss your research, your results. So I was lucky enough to kind of like get a lot of exposure there. And I would say for having both been in academia outside of like the technical or the technology field, it gave me an opportunity to talk about some uh, uh, like areas of research that are quite dry, quite demanding intellectually. So not always like the most interesting material to present. But it really forced me to hone my skills a bit better. Not that I claim that like I learned everything there. I think inside technology, I got also a chance to do a lot of presentation, talk to a lot of people. And now in my current role, a big part of like what I do is communicating to my teams and communicating to other functions across the business, like be the face of engineering. Um, but no, this did not come naturally to me. The other added dimension is that my first language isn't English, so I've had to also work on that. I did most of my education in French, so uh, potentially like some of your listeners can hear it in my accent, but yeah, I've also had to work on the English, like work on the speaking, develop my vocabulary, my like the way that I would present things like in English quite a bit. I've also done a lot of this through writing, which has been like really beneficial for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yannick, I'm also an introvert like yourself, and me deciding I needed to get better at speaking in front of others had to do with having to give presentations in front of management when I worked in medical devices as a product development engineer. It was a monthly thing, and I those first few presentations were terrible. They there's no other way to get around it, really. I mean, I knew they were bad because I'd get these questions afterwards that I thought I'd answered during the presentation. So I said, well, I guess I didn't present that well. And ultimately, my project got canceled. And this is over 15 years ago now. And I just think to myself, man, if I was just better at communicating the usefulness of this project, then who knows? Maybe they could have had a product right now that was making millions of dollars for the company. So but I guess we'll never know. But ultimately, when it came down to it, I eventually saw this benefit of, being a person that has technical abilities, but and being able to communicate that expertise to others is just it's so important. I mean, even with the when I tell other technical people about the usefulness of speaking, I refer back to myself and I tell them I don't speak because I thoroughly enjoy getting up in front of people and speaking. I mean, it's fine and all, but I do it because of the usefulness of it. You get so many benefits from being able to communicate effectively with others as opposed to, that technical person who just thinks that their technical work will do all the talking for them.
I agree. I agree, and the reality I think like nowadays is that it requires so many people to build the types of products and systems, many of them that we build and maintain. That one of the crux really ends up being not like at the individual level, like how much code, how much you can build, but more like the communication and the collaboration part. So being a strong a strong communicator is absolutely essential. I think uh, it's a skill that can actually differentiate you in your career in terms of like what you can accomplish, especially from like a people project management perspective. I think it's absolutely fundamental. And you were saying that when you had started and essentially kind of like had difficulties or it was a bit challenging at the beginning. You weren't particularly successful. I think we all experience this. I think it's important to remember that none of us are good at it. Like when we started, very few of us, and that it's okay to fail. And it's part of the learning process. And it's better to put yourself out there and fail and get a few times when you get people who kind of like zone out or stop listening or don't pay attention anymore. It's okay. It's fine. It's part of the learning process. It's just it's feedback, and it's just an indication of like what you need to work on. And don't waste it. Like go back to these people and say, "Hey, I noticed that you zoned out a little bit there. How could I have made it more interesting? Like what did I miss? How did I not speak to you? I invited you to this meeting. I thought like you would have like some insights and you could provide some help. Obviously I missed the mark. Tell me more, right? Like go seek the feedback. That is how we all improve.
Absolutely. And hopefully if they fall asleep, they don't snore.
I have not had that happen, but I have seen people kind of, nod a little bit and just kind of, yeah, get ready for a bit of a nap later on.
So for the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Yannick, and they think that becoming more effective speaking is something they want to pursue, what's one piece of advice you'd offer to them?
Again, to me, it's like practice, go seek the opportunities, ask for feedback, put yourself out there. It's pretty intimidating, but the only way that it's going to get is going to start to feel more natural, is to do it and do it a lot. Yeah, seek the opportunities. Ask your manager, like, are there opportunities? Sign up for a conference. Go talk about some of your work, some of the things that excite you. It's the single best way to get better at it, and don't be too hard on yourself. Like, everyone's on their own journey. There's gonna be a few times where you're gonna fall a bit flat, and that's fine. That's okay. It's part of it.
Yep, 100%. Practice makes progress, that's for sure. This has been a great conversation, Yannick. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn if you look for my name, and I am on Substack. I've been meaning to write a little bit more. I am in the process of organizing some of my thoughts around some of the things that I would like to talk about. Lots going on in the world of tech and AI in particular. So I have thoughts, and I'll be writing a little bit more about it.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Yannick.
Thanks, everyone.